Everyone thought we were crazy. Who's ever heard of having a little urban village out in the middle of a forest? Serenity is all about common sense ways to develop places for us to live and how we can interrelate with nature and with each other in a meaningful way.
I'm here because Serenity is my family's project. We bought the original property in 1991 when I was 7, moved here full-time when I was 10, but we're setting out with the intention to truly create a place, and a place that is authentic, a place that is living, a place that is breathing, a place that honors nature, a place that honors people, a place that honors art and beauty. And doing that all holistically, where you can meet people where they are. People who are moving here are opting into wanting a better life for themselves and for their families.
In 2000, we were concerned that urban sprawl was going to disturb this beautiful countryside on the edge of Atlanta, as it has so many places in so many urban areas around the nation. We discovered the only way to really save it was to develop portions of it, to show that you can actually develop without destroying the natural landscape. But this isn't difficult. This isn't some formula that we discovered. We simply looked at common sense reality of how did we live when we were healthier and happier in a simpler society. So we have the sidewalks, we have front porches pulled close to those sidewalks. We really built Serenity for the pedestrian, so within a 10, 15, 20-minute walk, I can reach every urban area through that wonderful trail of nature. So when you go out the front door, it's time to engage. And when you go out the back door, you engage with nature. 70% of our landscaping is edible. There are blueberries at every crosswalk. Farmers market, I say everyone comes for their vegetables for next week and the gossip from last week. So it's a very social kind of thing. Or even if it's the first time you visited, people look in your eyes, they greet you. That's not a rule by any means. It's just the way you feel because you feel connected. I'm amazed because we started this just to protect our own backyard. To my surprise, Serenity is already becoming a national and international model in community development. Some people want to call us a new urbanist community, or they want to call us a farm-to-table community. And yes, we're all of those things. Serenity is very different than a lot of communities that are being developed with only a focus on how it's built. We are looking at the total integration. It just takes thought and determination to live a healthier lifestyle that's more connected with one another and with nature.
So that gives you a good glimpse at what Serenity is about. Now, how it came about, I grew up on a family farm in Colorado, as I mentioned in the earlier session. Went into the food industry, formed my own restaurant company. We were 34 restaurants in several states. And in 1991, when our children were 3, 5, and 7, my wife said to me, I see there's a farm advertised on the Georgia Preservation newsletter, just 25 minutes southwest of the airport. Wouldn't that be fun to take the kids out to see a farm? And we couldn't imagine that there was open land that close to Atlanta. And so I called and announced that we weren't interested in buying anything, but we had these darling children and wanted to show them animals. And of course, anyone with anything for sale says, come on. And we arrived, and they had the Shetland pony saddled, and they took us out, and there were deer bounding and bunnies eating as though on cue, and we bought the farm. And we had a great house in the city with the movie theater, and all 3 of my children are girls, and so we had a Barbie room all carpeted. They had their own little battery-operated cars, and to my amazement, on every Friday they were anxious to leave all of those material trappings and go to the shack that my wife had fixed out on the back of the farm, because we'd rented the main house out, and connect to nature. And watching them for 3 years on the weekends, and watching our own family, it was my value shift. And so in '94, we sold the company, we sold that big house, and we took over that old 1905 farmhouse and started restoring it. Well, 7 years later, my daughter and I were on a job on our property, which at that point was 300 acres. We'd gone from 60 to 300. And the bulldozers were bulldozing the forest next to us. And I ran out with a beating heart and stopped the guy and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "We have just been hired to take the trees down. I guess they're putting houses here. That's what always happens." And I ran back and tried calling the developers in New York. And as I called other landowners, long stories, various things, but within 3 weeks I had another 600 acres under contract. And the landowner, the doctor got back, and I found he had sold it to a small landowner who was putting in his own little landing strip for a little prop planing head. So the immediate threat was gone. But that's what pushed me over the edge into deciding we needed to do something different. And so we then engaged the entire community, because we saw that what was happening with many times models, they ended up being magnets rather than models, and how you could change the area. And so we brought landowners together in 40,000 acres. And over a 2-year conversation, we totally changed the land use and zoning laws, so that any time the development was proposed, it triggered preservation. And we have a toolkit of ways we do that. And so we've taken our own land on Serenbe to demonstrate how we can work with nature in preservation and actual development for those that are pro-development. We've been able to put 20% more housing per square mile than the old model of sprawl. Infrastructure is 40% of what it would be, both to install and to maintain, and values are much higher. So it's a win-win-win, no matter if you're the developer, the preservationist, or the local government. And so it's just, there's a lot of sanity in how we develop. And actually, if you look, we are not doing anything different than a developer would have done 80 years ago in developing community, except we're putting fiber in. And we have to really remember how it was when we lived more sane versus trying to look at those other things. So I think that's probably my introductory moment, and as we get into questions and answers, I can answer a little
Sounds
bit more
good.
of that.
Okay. Nina, do you want
My name is Nina Cohen, and I'll be talking to y'all about the thriving commune scene in Louisa County, Virginia. My other car isn't mine either. That's what we always say would be the ideal bumper sticker for our community cars. Cool. Is there something there? Of course, when most people hear the word commune, first thing they think about is the 60s and the 80s, and they figure communes started right around then and ended right around the 70s when everybody stopped living in communes and started doing cocaine and disco and whatnot. But as probably most of you know, the U.S. has a very long history of experimental living, utopian visions, alternative societies, starting with the Puritan colonies onward, Oneida community, the Manna colonies, Harmony community, the Shakers, you name it, religious, secular. There's been a very long history of people trying to experiment with different ways of living. And that continues today. In fact, it's probably bigger than ever. The Federation of Intentional Communities is a nonprofit group that's devoted to networking with communities and spreading the word about cooperative living. they put out the communities directory on a semi-regular basis. Every few years they put out a new version of it in print, and they also have it completely updated and entire online. They also publish Communities magazine, and they've got well over 1,000 listings for North America in the communities directory. And I think 200 or 300 or so internationally in Europe and whatnot. Of course, those run the gamut from student co-ops, co-housing groups, support groups, spiritual communities, service-based communities, and all the way up to full income sharing, straight out commies is what I'm going to be talking about. So the group of communities that I'm part of is part of the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, which is a much smaller and more kind of stringent group that really is full income sharing in their values and the way that they live. Sorry, my throat's been messed up today, so just getting into that. So the values of the Federation of Egalitarian Communities espouses include holding land, labor, income, and other resources in common, of course, so it's full income sharing. And that's a much more radical approach than most Americans are willing to even consider in this day and age in the way our society is structured today. With our great, emphasis on private property ownership and consumption and all that stuff. Where it's important for everyone to have their own house and their own car and their own finances, all that sort of thing. Unfortunately, all that freedom and independence often comes at the cost of owning lots of expensive things and having lots of debt. And along with that, communities with some responsibility for the needs of their members. That includes clothes, housing, healthcare, everything like that. Practice nonviolence. And egalitarianism is a big cornerstone of the Federation of Egalitarian Communities, thus the name. This includes non-discrimination on the basis of gender, gender identity, sex, sexual orientation, race, creed, religion, etc., etc., etc. And it also means working towards lack of hierarchy. No charismatic leaders, no disproportionate allocation of resources based on anything, equal access to opportunities, equal access to decision-making, all that kind of thing. Along with that, environmentalism, sustainability, and conservation of resources is an important value to the FEC members. And creating processes for communication, which includes not just being open to communication, but actively having a clear, conscious framework for decision-making, for conflict resolution, all that sort of thing, where everybody's got an equal voice and equal opportunity to be heard and to make decisions. The FEC's got 6 full members. Twin Oaks, East Rim, Acorn, Sand Hill Farm, Sapling Community, and Division. The full members adhere to all those values and are full income sharing and all that sort of thing. We also have a number of communities in dialogue who work closely with us and share a lot of our values, but don't follow all of the FEC's policies. Or several of them are very new and just forming, so they're kind of still in dialogue until they're really established. Including Precarious, which is a very exciting new urban community in Richmond, in a big house. So that's where Louisa County is. And these are the 4 communities that are within like this one little 12-mile radius. You can talk about what makes these communities successful models, basically, for sustainability and sustainable living. So Twin Oaks is by far the biggest and oldest of the communities in Louisa. They started way back in 1967, they're as old as I am. And they were founded not by hippie flower children, but by people who were interested in B.F. Skinner's behaviorist ideas, especially the ones that were laid out in his Walton 2 book. Some of you might have heard of that. A lot of the behaviorist stuff pretty much went by the wayside in the first few years. The only thing that they still retain are their labor credit system and the form of governance. Twin Oaks is about 100 adults and 17 kids. They have 450 acres, several successful businesses. And of all the 4 communities, they probably grow the biggest proportion of their own food. I'm not sure just what the percentage is, it's like 60 or 70%, something like that. Acorn Community was started by a bunch of Twin Oakers in 1993 who thought that Twin Oaks wasn't growing fast enough and it didn't look like they wanted to take on enough new members, so they branched out and got a loan from Twin Oaks and started a new community it's about 7 miles away in the same county as Twin Oaks. Acorn is 30 members and 4 kids right now on 90 acres. And they're extremely different from Twin Oaks in terms of their kind of general orientation towards the egalitarian thing. They are very staunch anarchists. They work to have very minimal, if any, hierarchical structures. They do their most important decisions by full consensus. What else? Oh, and despite all this stuff, they still probably run the most financially successful of all the community businesses. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, which deals with heirloom seeds, and it's turned into a multi-million-dollar business in the last few years, which is pretty fantastic. Run by a bunch of anarchists. Then there's Living Energy Farm. They were founded in 2012, I believe. They're community and dialogue. They don't strictly adhere to everything in the FEC. They're run by a kind of a central board. They just have a revolving kind of cast of interns and shorter-term members. And their main mission is to be a fossil fuel-free demonstration farm and to experiment with a lot of alternative technologies. Like they're doing a wood gas tractor. They do all kinds of solar cooking stuff. They do solar, you name it, everything. They do a lot of cool stuff. Methane gas for cooking. Little natural gas system. It's pretty awesome. And then there's Sapling Community, the newest branch. We founded in 2014. I'm living there currently, although I'm considering moving back to Twin Oaks next year. There's generally a lot of moving back and forth between the communities. And that basically started out as just a little chunk of 3 acres or so that Acorn bought because it was close by to some friends of the community. Crappy little manufactured home. So our mission is to rip up all that lawn. This is actually pretty early pictures we found lawn. It's already in gardens, putting chickens, putting ducks, putting fruit trees. We converted the house over to wood. We're taking off the grid. We put in a water catchment system, basically making this totally generic suburban little piece of crap house into a homestead. And right now we're 3 full members, 2 kids. We've got several provisional members who are going to be coming in the next year, including another couple of kids. Okay, so what I mean when I say that these communities are successful models of cooperative living, well, first off, they all support themselves very well with home-based businesses, which means your community is basically get out of bed, walk 2 minutes through the woods to the hammock shop or the tofu shop or whatever, and there you go. You can spend weeks and weeks, if not, a very long time not having to get into the car at all. You live in these communities is really awesome. So Twin Oaks has Twin Oaks Hammocks as one of their main businesses. This is their first business. It's not super sustainable in terms of the materials. It's polypropylene, which is a plastic product that the hammocks are made out of, but it's very lends itself very well to community values in that the work is very social, it's very quiet, it's very portable, and it can be broken down into a lot of steps that are pretty low scale. So it's easy to plug in new people and have them be productive right away. And visitors and new members and stuff can very easily contribute very quickly. Twin Oaks also has Twin Oaks Tofu, and that's most of the other half of their business. They also have a small flicking index and business, but the tofu and the hammocks are the main things. The tofu is more kind of industrial, heavier work, but it also, of course, lends itself to good ecological values because it's organically grown soybeans. It's supporting vegetarian diets and ideals if you want to lessen your meat consumption, all that sort of thing. It's also really good tofu. They just recently had a multi-million-dollar expansion of the tofu plant too. The business is really booming. And of course, Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, like we talked about before. That's Acorn's business. The company itself's been around since like the early 90s or so, but Acorn bought it maybe 10 years ago and just really expanded it tremendously. Took on a lot of new growers that they contract out to get heirloom seeds. They've expanded to more than 700 different varieties of heirloom vegetables, flowers, herbs, that sort of thing. And then Sapling's home business is sort of a subsidiary, I guess, or an outgrowth of Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. It's also heirloom seeds, but it focuses more on medicinals and culinaries. Things like ginseng and hyssop and plantain and all kinds of stuff like that. Sorry, I'm referring to notes a lot. This is the first time I've given a talk like this. Yes, not only are those businesses very successful financially, just in terms of day-to-day supporting the communities, but they also make enough that they have substantial savings, time to do the stuff they want to do. There's a lot of other examples, like so as people cook lunch and dinner every day for the community in their big commercial kitchen dining area. So it's kind of like buffet style. It's served. If you want to come get lunch, come for dinner, you can do it. You don't have to cook your own food. If you don't want to, you can cook your own food. That's an option too. There's other kitchens throughout the residential buildings, but it's always available for those who really hate to cook, like me.
And I was there, and the food is delicious.
It's amazing food.
Very,
It's
very
homegrown food. You can't get any better. If you like to cook, it's great. You get to cook amazing meals for 100 people. I hate it, so for me it's great. Let's see what else. And you have small teams of people doing all kinds of other stuff that ordinarily individual households each have to take care of. There's like 2 or 3 people who do everybody's individual tax return in the community. So you never have to do your taxes again, if that's the kind of thing you hate doing. There's 2 or 3, maybe 4 people who do all the main community accounting. Another thing you have to deal with, bill paying, all that kind of thing. There's a small team that does community laundry. So there's a big what we call Connie clothes, like a big attic full of all kinds of cool clothes from yard sales and thrift stores, and God only knows where the people who buy these things get them, but it's just like stuff full of really hilarious clothes, which you can get, you can wear, and then you just put it right back in the Connie laundry for somebody to do the laundry if you don't want to deal with it. I mean, or you can take it, you can keep it in your room, wash it yourself, have that piece of clothing however long you want, you're tired of it, go get something else. I would go through months just like never doing laundry, except just without Connie clothes and put it all back when it's dirty and then laundry and get something new. It's great. All right, so that's sharing resources, and one thing that facilitates that, and the other thing that really contributes hugely to quality of life is Twinosis' deceptively simple but quite radical labor system. And this is unique. None of the other of the FEC communities do this exact system. Well, Eastman's kind of close. But this came out of B.F. Skinner's ideas, and it's been through trial and error kind of modified down to essentially what this is here. It's more complicated than this, but what it boils down to is every 1 hour of labor that you do, you get 1 credit. Quota is 42 hours a week. You have to do 42 hours of some sort of labor every week. Now there's a pension system where every year you are 50 or over, you get 1 hour off your quota. So if you're 50, you only have to work 41 hours. If you're 52, etc. And all work is valued equally. Childcare, laundry, income-producing work of all kinds. If you're doing sales, if you're doing any kind of managing roles in businesses, 1 hour of that is the same as 1 hour of watching kids, or 1 hour of splitting firewood. 1 hour cooking, it's all the same. 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour. And nobody gets any extra compensation for doing any particular kind of work. If you're a manager of, one of the managers on the Topher team, it's a huge responsibility. You don't get more money, you don't get a better room, you don't get better clothes, you don't get anything different than anyone else gets. Tangibly, I mean, you might get more respect, but it's kind of not a thing you can control. The only thing that people absolutely have to do is 1 cleanup shift a week. That's the only thing that they discovered that not enough people are happy to do out of a group of 100 people. So, like, we call it K-shift. So it's like doing dishes and cleaning up the kitchen, all that kind of thing. 1 2-hour shift a week, everybody has to do. Or cleaning up one of the other smaller residential kitchens that are available, that kind of thing. Everything else, I mean, even cleaning bathrooms, doing all kinds of horrible desk work like accounting, childcare, laundry, turning horrible smelly compost, anything. There's somebody who's happy to do it. It's amazing, other than washing dishes. So they found that there's no point in valuing any work more than any other work. I mean, there's people who love the challenge and having a lot of responsibility, and they'd be bored out of their minds if they couldn't do that. And that's, apparently rewarding enough.
No dishwashers.
Huh?
No electric dishwasher.
It is actually, yeah, it's one of those big commercial, I don't know if you've seen those things, but you pile in one of those plastic things, you pile it in there, and you put it in, and it's super hot, and it kind of sanitizes, and you put detergent in. So it's, Twix is a big commercial kitchen, but the smaller residential kitchens don't have that. Yeah, Twix is not like, no fossil fuel, no nothing, they're, not that either. One of what I've found is the interesting effects of valuing all work equally. The stuff that's traditionally been considered women's work gets the same amount of credit, is pretty much valued the same as any other sort of work. And also people tend to very often take on new and different work whenever they're sick of what they're doing. There's no penalty for it. I mean, people might get pissed at you if you don't train someone to take your place, if you're doing something that requires skill, knowledge, that sort of thing, but there's no penalty. And in fact, it's even expected that if you're tired of what you're doing, if you hate your job anymore, you'll switch over to something new. And most people do a wide variety of things. Almost nobody there I can think of will do 8 hours of the same job, no way. I mean, pretty much everybody has at least 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 different things they do. So every day is really varied. Most work shifts that people do together when that's required are 3 or 4 hours. That's it. There's no 8-hour day doing all the same thing. And I think that, at least, yeah, in my experience, contributes hugely to quality of life. And then remember, an average of about 20 hours a week is what people do for income-producing work. Everything else that people would ordinarily do and not even get any sort of compensation for, like their laundry, their shopping, their bill paying, all that, that's included in the 42 hours. You know, most people have to work their 40 hours at income, and then they do all of that other maintenance stuff. People who work under the system have a lot more free time. A lot more time available to do stuff like political activism, to do stuff like making music, like putting on plays for the community, all that sort of thing. And the community often will give, if there's the budget for it and whatnot, will give labor credits for people to do things like teach yoga classes, do things like, well, putting on the plays, doing political activism. Those things are all things that have been funded with labor credits, so people can actually get credit for doing that. They funded the garden managers and garden managers for 20 years or so to write a book on organic gardening, which is on Amazon, actually kind of high up, $10, yeah. Really good book. And you get labor credits for taking care of sick or injured members if they need help with something, bring food, that sort of thing, you get labor credit for that. If you yourself are sick, you get a full day's worth of labor credit because you couldn't work. You get a full day's labor credit for your birthday. You get labor credits for community holidays like Christmas, anything else. All sorts of things. All right, so it all sounds great and awesome, and of course, there's any number of drawbacks and difficulties to living like this oftentimes. And it's a very difficult concept, I think, for Americans to think about not owning your own car, not having full control or really control at all of every aspect of your finances, not owning your own house, and not building up any of your own personal equity. I mean, as long as you live there, you're not building up any savings, you're not building up any investments. If you leave, you don't have anything more than what you came with. It's a hard thing for people to swallow, but I think the trade-offs are really worth it for the quality of life that you get. And actually, I didn't have an ending, so that's that.
Excuse me, I have a question. How does your community deal with education of children?
Oh, right now they have homeschooling for a lot. There's a number of members who teach math, who teach Latin, who teach Spanish, who teach English.
Are the children allowed to go on to college if they choose?
Oh, sure. Yeah, in fact, one of the kids just turned 18 last year, and he's going to be applying to college this year.
And that's covered by the community?
Yeah, I believe they did fund his scholarship. Yeah, maybe it's community college he's going out with? Honestly, I don't remember, but yeah, it's been community.
We can ask more
Yeah,
questions.
he was born there, he lived there, most people there. Yeah, sorry, I'm happy to answer more questions.
We'll make sure there's time afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I promise, I've only got like 133 slides. Welcome, my name is Michael Fleischacker. I'm a professor of landscape architecture and environmental science here at Del Valle. I'm also a licensed landscape architect. I'm going to approach this from a little different angle than Steve and Nina did. I'm going to talk a little bit about the front-end process of getting to these types of communities. And who can tell me the difference between creativity and innovation? Is there?
No.
Anyone think there is?
I'm thinking creativity is more in your mind, innovation is the product.
Exactly. Exactly. Creativity is the precursor to innovation. Nina and Steve are innovators. Their communities are innovative. But before they got to those communities, they had to be creative. Someone had to think up these new ideas. That's what creative is, thinking up new ideas. Innovation is acting on those new ideas. The most extreme creative companies or innovative companies come up with thousands of creative ideas every year. They might act on only a couple of them. The innovation comes from only a couple of really creative ideas. I'm going to step back even further now. How many of you have heard of this? You've probably heard it today, right? And I think it's probably on both of your websites. Biophilia. What is biophilia?
Love of nature.
Love of nature.
All of these.
Where does that come from? Genetics, evolution. It goes back to our earliest time. Its official definition is something along the lines of an intrinsic connection to nature. So what is nature? Is this room nature? Is this desk nature? Is this screen nature? How many of you think yes? I do. You know why I do?
There's nothing that's not nature.
That's right. We're humans, right? We're human. We're part of the animal kingdom. We're part of nature. So everything we build and create and innovate is part of nature. And so to me, what I think of when I think of biophilia and this intrinsic connection to nature is not just about the natural systems. It's not just about water or the birds up in the trees or the butterflies out in the pasture, but it's a continuum. Over here we have what I would call pure or raw nature. And over here is the more disturbed, disrupted, some might even argue in today's society, human nature. So this is the other end of that natural continuum. And my argument is, the closer we get to this, the more we experience this. And the more we experience this, the healthier and the higher quality of life we have. Both of their communities offer that. How do we get there? I've had the benefit and the privilege of working on a number of projects that allow me to explore that. And for the last decade or so, I've really gotten into exploring tools that help me uncover stories. And one of the stories I uncovered in all of my research was this. This idea that, why do we need to understand geological history? I mean, you can make good arguments of why you need to understand community history when you're working on a historic preservation project or something like that. But geological history, the evolution of humans, biophilia. We're animals, right? We have evolved to survive. And as I say here, holy crap, we've succeeded, right? Another couple billion coming up pretty soon in 2050, right? So how do we manage that? This was 20 years ago already. And to me, it's the closest thing that I've seen to a pretty good definition of sustainability. And with today's topics about community, you can easily change development to community. The basic idea of taking care of our own now and in the future. I look at fabrics. You can find a lot of different models for what sustainability means. But what I've really been focusing on is this idea of regeneration. And this is what I refer to as fabrics for sustainability that are very closely aligned to what I use as fabrics for regeneration. This idea of people planet, and profit. You've heard it said several different ways, even today, economics, social and culture, natural systems, water, soil, plants, animals. Are we sustainable? No. No. So what happens? If we don't do anything about it,
We go
anyone
the
here
way-
predict the
We
future?
go the way of yeast, if we do not make a change.
There's a lot of compelling arguments that we could all implode, the human race could disappear, and then there's also arguments that nothing's gonna happen. Don't worry about it, you know? And we all kind of have to make our own decisions. But the reality is that the climate is changing. There's global changes going on that are beyond our individual controls. Sustaining, by definition, is maintaining a certain threshold. I would argue that we don't have anything, I won't say anything, we don't have a lot of things worth sustaining right now. So I'm looking for ways to improve things, and that's this idea of regeneration. It's looking at things holistically. It's looking at living systems. We're all part of living systems. We are a living system. Internally, we have all these organs and stuff that work together as a living system. On our body, we have a community of living systems hosting on us, living on us, right? And then we're part of a larger community as part of a larger system. Watersheds is another good example of that. So as a designer, I'm looking for ways to tap into those living systems and try to figure out how they all work together, find out where there's opportunities to improve those living systems. I believe you can't design regeneration. You can't design a sense of community, but you can set the stage that gives those the best opportunity for success. And I mentioned this already, the spirit of place and the essence of stakeholders. That takes those fabrics that I was talking about earlier, kind of sums them up, and they're woven together with living systems. Stakeholders. That's understanding the people, the animals, the plants. It's everything that's living that has a stake in what you're working on. It's not only the specific site that I might be looking at, it's the larger context as well. Because what I'm working on in this quarter of an acre over here might impact everything downstream from me. Or what's going on upstream from me might impact my site. Or what's going on next door at the neighbor's house might impact what's going on my site. So it's understanding the stakeholders, and not just understanding what they want, but understanding what they value. You want something, why do you want it? And understanding that there's a value behind that. And I would argue that it's never about money. Now that is a really fun conversation to have with a bunch of college students. had a few of those. And then the spirit of place is taking all of these living systems, and once you get it all figured out and sort of synthesize all of this information that you've collected, solutions are born out of that. It's a process of discovery. That's the spirit of that place coming to life. Also integrated into my particular process is that everything needs to tap a minimum of one world imperative. And these are just a few examples of world imperatives. But I often find that, you can hit all of those pretty easily if you really think about it. And it adds that much more value to what we do in our daily lives. Living through connections. You heard both Steve and Nina talking about connections. It's connections to nature. It's connections within nature. It's connections between people. And I use nature and people obviously separated from what I do over there, but mostly just to convey the message that I'm trying to get across there. I'm going to share a couple of case studies. I'll try to wrap up quickly, probably 5 minutes or so, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to take part in a Bronx, New York international competition. And there was 3 of us that sat down one evening and said, let's do that. And 3 days later we submitted it. 3 sleepless nights and days later we submitted it. But the basic idea is we went back to our process and this idea of rings of influence. If we're going to propose something that's in the center of this this bullseye, rings of influence is this idea that there's rings out. And so we said, one of the tools I use regularly is that if I'm going to propose something and drop that rock into the water, it's got to positively influence at least 3 rings of living systems. And we did that here, and what really came out of it was this idea of history. And there's a whole story behind the Bronx, if you're not familiar with it. The Bronx were actually a forest when New York City was first getting settled. Settlement in New York started at the southern tip, southern Manhattan, and moved north. And early on, this was an 1809 record of the Bronx, all forest. Right? And you'll see that change with each subsequent page. We had a total of 4 sheets that told the story. So this was the past history. It's sort of a description of that. In 2009, 200 years later, that's what's left. Right? It's fragmented. It's disconnected. It doesn't come back to that idea that everything's connected anymore. And our solutions was this idea that we're going full circle again and bringing back what drew people to the Bronx to begin with, which was this idea to escape New York at the time and all that it was. But our solution wasn't to level the Bronx and rip up all the asphalt and concrete and replant it. It was the idea of using today's technology, using the values of today's society, somewhat, we'll leave that alone, and marrying a new Bronx with a historic area, and regreening of the Bronx. And you can see how that started to take shape. And what we did was we came up with a 100-year plan, first 25, 50, 75, and 100 years. It's this idea about not only habitat for vegetation and obviously the aesthetic and the intrinsic connections that you can have through plant material, but growing food, harvesting and managing rainwater in a different way, alternative sources of energy, alternative sources of income, cottage industry, and things like that. And we were blessed with the idea, or with the results of this competition to get an honorable mention. And this was put up at Columbia University as part of an exhibit that they did following this competition. So that was a really fun project that we worked on. Dr. Casas is very familiar with this project as well. And this is a project that we worked on. Have any of you seen me speak before? Okay, so it's going to be, some of it's going to be redundant for you. I apologize for that. But about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, when I was first contacted by a local mission group, a medical mission group at Mount Carmel. And they wanted to talk to us about food and water in Haiti. How many of you have been to Haiti? One. Haiti is a really interesting country, and it's known as the poorest country, and I think data would prove that it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And in 2010, you may all remember, they suffered a devastating earthquake. But even before then, they were an extremely poor country. The earthquake just exacerbated many of the problems they already had. And they, when we first went out there in 2012, they still had hundreds of thousands of people living in tents, which were basically cardboard boxes or plastic bags, just put up in these open, abandoned parking lots or fields, and had just horrible conditions for living, unsafe, unhealthy. Something like 60% of their water was used for, or 60% of their annual income was used for potable water, which was literally these tanker trucks coming around and filling up dusty, dirty 5-gallon buckets whatever they might have, to containers, or people walking around with Ziploc bags of water in a larger bag, and they'd sell Ziploc bags of water to people. Water that we probably wouldn't even take a bath in the United States. They were using as their potable water. And their main food was imported rice. And so they came to us asking if we can help, just on the micro scale, how do we start to alleviate that? They've been completely deforested for the most part. You look at their neighboring country, and it's completely forested. And you can, if you look at an aerial, this is the border here, if you look at an aerial, it's all forest, no forest. And their forests are used for, primarily, they cut down their forests for some building early on, but mostly for cooking. And so we looked at ways that, our fabrics, again, how do we do this? What is our strength? Our strength is education. We can be creative and we can be innovative, but as an institution, the university is about education. And so we took our creativity, we took our innovation, and we married it to education down there on the ground. And it was about partnerships. And the priest that we were down there staying with, he said that if you're coming down here to give us something, don't. If you're coming down here to work with us and educate us, and over the long term, then please, you're more than welcome to come back. And that was obviously a strong interest of ours. So we went down on an early scouting mission to see what they had to offer. A lot of rubble. I mean, there were whole buildings still collapsed and just laying there in the street from the earthquake. A lot of oil drums and shipping drums. We came up with the design. All of their buildings are flat for the most part. We were right in Port-au-Prince, essentially, in Delma, which is kind of what do you call that? Like the equivalent of like a suburb almost, or a community just outside of the downtown Port-au-Prince. And most of the buildings are one story, but they were designed with the capabilities of adding a second story. It was just usually not the money to add a second story. But they all had these rebar sticking up out of them and stuff. But there were no building codes or anything. So we weren't able to say for sure whether any building would support anything on top of it. And so in that first scouting mission, one of the things we did down there is that the father had already identified a couple of buildings that he thought would work. We went down there, and if there weren't any major structural flaws that we could see, we said, okay, we'll work with this, but we've got to come up with as light a weight of growing medium and everything else that we need to grow plants and harvest water. So in July of 2012, we went down there. Already gone past. All right, I'll be quick. In July of 2012, we went down there. We were supposed to go down there in like April or May, and then we kept kind of pushing it back as we were getting things ready to go down. And finally, July, and it was, what are you crazy? You're going down to Haiti in July? You know how hot it's going to be, right? So we went down there. It was hot. It was like 98 degrees during the day. It get down to 80, 85 at night. No air conditioning. Thankfully, the compound we had batteries, not a generator, right? Just batteries. I don't know how they recharge the batteries. The power went out a lot around the town. And at night, the town around us came to life. You could hear music going, and you could always tell when the power went out, because it just got silent. But our lights would stay on, and we had a fan, which was nice. But you adapt. And within 24 hours, I would say that it wasn't that breathtaking getting off the plane moment anymore. And we worked there for 7 days. We worked with them, local people, parishioners and neighborhood residents, to build these gardens up on the roof. The sun is a very difficult challenge down there, so we put shade cloth up to help manage that. Other challenges we had, I'll get to in a minute. The growing medium, we worked with Professor Larry Hefner, who some of you may have seen him speak. He's speaking this week as well. We worked with him to come up with some alternative growing mediums. The initial soils were actually brought down from the mountains. But we put together some formulas using waste out of the street, and hopefully chicken manure one of these days, and composting, and then these soils will hopefully regenerate themselves. And you can see, the first, we did 2 rooftops while we were down there. The first one, we took a lot of time talking about planting techniques, the soils, watering, care, even harvesting the fruit, or the vegetables, excuse me. A lot of these folks have never seen this stuff before. Lettuce was something that was a delicacy out in the countryside that they ate on Sundays. And here we're giving them an opportunity to grow it and have it every day. A lot of the people in the city didn't have that. So we brought in some things that we thought they would eat, but we weren't sure yet because it might be new to their diet, and other things that were more staples, like okra. And we educated them on just a couple of containers, and then we handed it off, and they took over. And they really did a great job and had a lot of fun in the process. Again, talked about caring for the gardens, building cisterns. It's extremely dusty. There's no soil on the ground. There's very few trees in the city. Don't know how they even grow in the city, but there's a few of them you see poking up above the rooftops. So we had to not only harvest the rainwater, they get as much rain down there as we do up here, but theirs is over a very short period of time. Ours is pretty much close to 4 inches of rain 12 months out of the year. They get the same amount of rain in 2 months. And so you have to capture it then and be able to hold it for future use. And it's extremely dusty, so we worked on filter systems, and we're still working on sort of how do we manage that water over a long period so that it doesn't become contaminated. But these are the cisterns that we installed. We hooked it to the rooftops. You can see some intricate piping and stuff. Those are suspended solid filters and things like that. They use this for drinking water now. And what they do is they actually take that and then run that through a 5-gallon bucket with filters, and that's their potable water. But they also use it to irrigate the plants up on the roof. I mentioned composting, again using oil drums and tires, which both are abundant anywhere and everywhere. If you ever have a chance to go to Haiti and arm wrestle a gentleman by the name of, what is it, Mad Dog? Mad Dog?
That's a sign.
Don't. Just don't. It was a lot of fun though, and we had another opportunity to play soccer with them. And that, again, if you go down and stay with Father Andrew at his compound and they decide they want to play a little soccer pickup match out on the gravel, which is where they play soccer because they don't have any green, don't. We found out after they got done kicking our butts that several of them were from the Haitian national team. But again, the most important thing of all of this was that message up on top and what came out of that. And this idea that community is not only your neighbors next door, but they're neighbors in other parts of the world as well. And we all have an opportunity to bring all of that together. I'm not going to go any further on this. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And thank you all again for coming.